There are periods in the month when everything seems heavier, but not on the outside. The density is internal, silent, almost imperceptible to the eyes of those observing from afar. The curious thing is that, for those who have strong Scorpio in their chart, this is no coincidence. According to astrology, this sign does not respond to days like others. It reacts to the underground of time, and when Pluto, your ruling planet, begins to move hidden forces, even slowly, the body feels it before the mind understands. In the month of January, Pluto is in retrograde transit, and according to astrological traditions, this movement tends to activate internal zones linked to transformation, loss, reconstruction, and emotional confrontation. Not dramatically, but silently, almost as if something was being rearranged in the background, without needing our permission. Spiritual astrology considers Pluto not a planet that accelerates, but a symbol that recalibrates internal structures through depth. And Scorpio, by essence, is a sign that notices these changes even when no one talks about them. Therefore, there are phases of the month when Scorpios feel more, without knowing why. The weather doesn't change outside, but it does change inside. There is a type of demand that appears without warning. Review, let go, withdraw. This is not necessarily a problem. It could just be the natural functioning of a sign that works with layers that most ignore. With each cycle, this internal movement seems to repeat itself, but astrology shows that it never comes the same. Something recalibrates, something calls for silence, and that's exactly where the real learning begins to reveal itself. When these internal cycles begin to manifest themselves, ignoring them can create even more confusion. That's why understanding what's behind each phase of the month, especially for those with Scorpio in their chart, is not just useful, it's necessary. According to some schools of esoteric astrology, the more clarity you have about what Pluto is activating, the less the weight of the unknown, and the greater your awareness of your own emotional rhythm. This type of reflection is not about predicting what will happen, but about recognizing when something is happening and allowing it to have a legitimate place in your experience. If you've noticed that certain moments of the month awaken specific emotions, and if this emotional density seems to return in a cyclical way, it's worth observing how these movements can be linked to real astrological patterns, and not just chance. Sharing your perception in the comments can expand this collective field of listening. By writing down what you feel during these phases, you contribute to a conversation that goes beyond the surface, and this helps other people, including those who don't know how to name what they feel, to locate themselves within their own processes. If this content has made sense to you so far, consider leaving a like, not just as support for the channel, but as a sign that these conversations need to continue to exist. If you are not yet registered, sign up now to follow the next videos, which will bring new layers of interpretation to the signs and their spiritual journeys. Here, every detail has a purpose, and the next one is already being prepared. The phases of the moon do not affect all signs in the same way. For Scorpio, according to mystical interpretations of spiritualized astrology, the lunar movement is not just a variation in the sky, it is a silent trigger of internal transformations. It is as if the moon activated emotional codes that were already there, dormant, just waiting for a symbolic push to emerge to the surface. This does not happen by rational choice. It's not about positive thinking, focus, or mental control. It is an organic, emotional, invisible, and often uncomfortable activation. With each lunar turn, Scorpio may notice that their disposition changes, their sensitivity changes, and more profoundly, the meaning they give to things also changes. During the new moon, for example, many Scorpios report a feeling of withdrawal, but not exactly voluntary. It is an introspection that seems to arise from within, as if the external world moved away and the only possible direction was to look within. There is no brightness. There are no ready answers. There are no clear definitions. It is the moment when old questions resurface uninvited. Questions about purpose, about deep relationships, about old pains, and even about unfulfilled desires. The new moon seems to be, for Scorpio, a type of cosmic silence that invites, or demands, a deeper pause. Some report more vivid dreams. Others notice forgotten memories emerging as if pulled by an ancient tide. All this, according to esoteric traditions, does not happen by chance. The new moon, absent of light, reveals what is usually ignored in the rush of routine. With the arrival of the first quarter, the energy changes, but in a subtle way. The internal friction intensifies. It is not a period of immediate relief, but rather of creative tension. Scorpio, at this stage, may begin to feel an almost physical need to act, to change, to break patterns, but without complete clarity about which direction to follow. It's as if the impulse came before the strategy. This phase, according to some initiated astrologers, represents the activation of the contrast between that which no longer serves and that which has not yet been revealed. Scorpio, being a fixed and water sign, often tries to resist this instability, but ends up being carried away by it. The desire to break with something arises, an emotional cycle, an old way of thinking, a stagnant connection, but at the same time an internal voice asks for caution. This duality is not a mistake. It is part of the emotional maturation process that takes place month by month. The tension reaches its peak during the full moon, especially this month of January, with the full moon scheduled for the 25th in the sign of Leo. Astrologically, this position generates a very strong symbolic contrast with Scorpio energy. Leo is light, visibility, expression. Scorpio is depth, reserve, silence. This opposition can create a relevant emotional conflict, the desire to control versus the desire to surrender. During these days, Scorpios may feel that they are being pressured to show themselves, to position themselves, to put out what would normally be kept away. There can be an impulse to reveal inner truths, and at the same time, a real fear of the consequences of doing so. Some people report, under this influence, episodes of emotional intensity that arise without a clear objective reason. It could be a conversation that activates old wounds, a seemingly banal situation that triggers tears or anger, or even a deep tiredness, as if something is being drained internally. The full moon in this context functions as a symbolic mirror, and not just any mirror, but one that magnifies the details you'd like to hide. What do you feel when you look in this emotional mirror? Some spiritual traditions say that it is at this moment that the soul reveals the knots that have not yet been undone, not out of punishment but out of need for release. Scorpio carries an emotional power that often does not find space to express itself in words. Therefore, when the full moon enters the scene, this internal content seeks alternative ways to exit, through dreams, impulses, drastic decisions, or even a momentary immersion in silence. It's not about losing control. It's about understanding what's behind the impulse to control. And then the waning moon arrives. The tide starts to go down. But contrary to what many people think, this is not the moment when Scorpio feels relief. In fact, for many, it is during this phase that exhaustion sets in. Not just any exhaustion, but one that carries an ancestral weight. According to interpretations of archetypal astrology, this is the moment where the body and soul ask for slowdown, not as an invitation, but almost as a silent demand. It is common for feelings of discouragement, a desire for isolation, and even a type of melancholy that have no logical explanation to appear at this stage. For Scorpio, who already moves between extremes naturally, this period may seem like a call to deeper reflection, not to escape the world, but to reorganize what was agitated in previous cycles. There are those who say, within some schools of Hermetic astrology, that the waning moon activates the memory of what needs to be released, not just habits or thoughts, but emotional burdens stuck in old situations, family patterns, unconscious loyalties. Scorpio, as it is the sign of transmutation, tends to feel this intensely, and when you can't name what you're feeling, you often choose silence. But this silence is not empty. It is a ritual, almost sacred silence that precedes renewal. Spirituality does not promise visible rewards at this moment, but it points out that this is where the deeper process is happening, even if externally nothing seems to have changed. The curious thing is to notice how these 4 lunar phases, which are repeated month after month, do not manifest themselves as a static repetition for Scorpio. Each cycle brings different nuances. Each month delivers symbolic learning, even if the form seems familiar. There is a kind of emotional language that only reveals itself to those who pay attention to their own internal cycles. And that's why many natives of this sign report, even without knowing exactly why, that they feel the weeks passing with different weights and tones. Astrology, in this case, does not offer absolute answers, but it suggests symbolic maps that can help decipher the reasons for certain sensations, certain behaviors, and even certain silences that no one sees, but that deeply mark those who feel them. If you've ever experienced something similar, if you've ever noticed that aces of the month seem to stir your insides in inexplicable ways, so your opinion can help broaden this conversation, share in the comments how you feel at each stage of the month. Do you notice repeating patterns? Have you identified any emotional changes during the moons? Your experience may echo that of others who are going through similar processes. When we talk about cycles, most people think of something predictable, almost mechanical, like the ticking of a clock or the succession of days and nights. But Scorpio never worked like that. According to currents of initiatory astrology, this sign lives in another time, a spiral time, where everything seems to return, but never in the same way. What is repeated actually transforms, and what returns carries with it an additional layer of complexity. For Scorpio, each month is less a calendar and more a curved mirror, showing parts of themselves that were previously distorted, hidden, or even denied. This cyclical dynamic is neither a punishment nor a fixed destiny. It is an internal movement that activates the symbolic recognition of poorly digested emotional experiences. Spiritual astrology does not see these returns as punishments, but as invitations. Invitations to revisit, not with the pain of the past, but with the emotional maturity acquired along the journey. The month, then, becomes a stage where a well-known play is performed again, but this time with a different perspective, with another understanding, with another presence. Many Scorpios report that certain situations seem to repeat themselves down to the smallest detail. It's as if they were facing the same problem, the same loss, the same type of relational conflict. However, when they look more closely, they realize that the context has changed. The pain may be similar, but it doesn't have the same strength as before. And, according to archetypal views of astrology, this reveals an essential fact. There are emotional codes within Scorpio that are only reorganized when the pain is felt again, but now with expanded consciousness. Feeling again, yes, but not in the same way. This is the key to the spiral. Pluto, as the symbolic ruler of Scorpio, represents this type of hidden time. It is a planet that does not accelerate what must be experienced. It only intensifies what needs to be revealed. Therefore, for those who have this strong archetype in their map, the phases of the month are not neutral. They bring questions, often silent, sometimes uncomfortable, but you almost always need it. Do you still identify with what hurt you? Does this wound still have control over your decisions? What do you gain by keeping that alive inside you? These are not questions that arise from books or other people's advice. They are born from within, in the most unpredictable moments, often in silence, in the middle of a seemingly ordinary day. It is in this context that repetitions take on new meaning. Because Scorpios are not tied to a cyclical destiny, he is involved in an energetic updating process that only happens when he chooses not to run away from himself. Unlike other signs that seek a quick exit, Scorpio tends to dive in. But this dip is not random. It follows a rhythm that defies linear logic. Therefore, it is common that, at certain points in the month, memories arise of something that seemed resolved, not as a relapse, but as an internal check. Are you dealing with this the same way, or has your way of feeling evolved? Psychological astrology usually says that Scorpio works with contents from the deep unconscious, and this means that your cycles are not guided by goals, but by revelations. Each month, each lunar phase, each movement of Mars or Pluto, each conversation that seems banal, everything can trigger a layer of the soul that was forgotten. And when this happens, the first reaction is usually to resist. The sign tries to rationalize, tries to contain, tries not to give a name to what it feels. But little by little, what was trapped begins to emerge, and that's when the real process of renewal begins. This type of movement requires emotional courage, because it's not just about remembering, it's about feeling again, now with maturity, with understanding, with presence. Spirituality in many traditions speaks of lucid pain, that which does not paralyze, but instructs. And Scorpio, more than any other sign, holds the key to transforming this pain into awareness. It is not an easy process, and it's not always clear, but there are signs, subtle, silent, that show when something is reorganizing internally. Some people report, during these monthly processes, a feeling of being out of ordinary time, as if life were running on a parallel frequency. The days pass, the routines continue, but inside, something different pulses. It can be an unnamed discomfort, an irritation that has no external cause, a desire to isolate oneself, or even a sudden inspiration to radically change something. Energetic astrology suggests that these impulses should not be dismissed. They are indicators that something is moving in the symbolic field. And the more you listen to these signs, the clearer the internal language that the sign carries becomes. This type of listening, however, cannot be rushed. Scorpio is not a sign of immediate responses. It requires continuous observation. Therefore, a good spiritual practice for this archetype is cyclical recording, writing down, month by month, the themes that return, words that are repeated in thoughts, patterns that reappear in relationships, reactions that manifest themselves without explanation. Over time, this practice can reveal personal maps of emotional transition that are not always obvious. And at this point, astrology and spirituality go hand in hand. Both serve as lenses for the invisible to become visible, not as a prediction, but as a symbolic reading of what is presenting itself now. From this perspective, it becomes easier to understand why Scorpio is reputed to be the sign of death and rebirth. But this death is not literal. It is symbolic, emotional, energetic. And rebirth does not happen as if by magic. It builds in layers, often silent. This is why cycles cannot be treated as deadlines. They are experiences lived inside, and month by month, they shape a new way of existing, not because the external has changed, but because the internal has gained a different perspective. The most important thing in this process is not to get rid of the pain quickly, nor to seek immediate meaning for everything that happens. It's allowing each return to be a point of observation, and recognize that the feeling of this again, it may actually be a sign that something is maturing, because feeling is not weakness, and returning to the old point with new awareness is exactly what turns the cycle into a spiral. A spiral that does not imprison but frees. If at any point during the month you felt like you were reliving something that you thought you had overcome, if you noticed that an old pain came back in a new guise, share in the comments how this manifested for you. What kind of situation returned? Was there a change in the way you responded? Your experience can help other people realize that they are not alone in their own cycles. As the days of January unfold, the energy field around and within Scorpio changes, as if each week tests a different aspect of what is hidden, what pulses in silence, what refuses to be controlled. Since the beginning of the month, Mars, a planet linked to action, initiative, and vital force, has been positioned in Capricorn, a sign of structure, discipline, and objectivity. For Scorpio, this transit creates a veiled but extremely real tension. It's like trying to translate dense feelings into linear, objective movements, with no room for hesitation. However, the Scorpio emotional universe does not fit within this practical and direct logic. The result of this, according to interpretations of symbolic astrology, can be a feeling of emotional stagnation, as if there is an internal call to act, but the body does not respond. Or worse, responds at the pace of the external world, but with the soul lagging behind. Many Scorpios may have felt, in the first days of January, that they were being pushed towards rational decisions, towards productivity without connection to what they really feel. It's as if one part is accelerating while the other is silently braking, and this disconnect creates a restlessness that is difficult to name. The impulse to act is present, but the motivation seems absent. This difficulty does not come from a personal failure. It is, according to esoteric currents of archetypal astrology, a natural response when the energy available in the sky contrasts with the deep nature of the sign. Scorpio does not act on external impulse. He needs to feel that something within him resonates with what is being done. Otherwise, the action becomes a burden. And this is precisely where Mars in Capricorn can function as a stern teacher. It demands movement with purpose. But Scorpio only finds this purpose when he dives in, when he listens, when he recognizes the origin of his desire. That is why, instead of stimulating action, this transit can generate involuntary silence. Not a peaceful silence, but a tense, charged silence, as if something was being gestated without a name. And as this silence stretches on, something begins to build up inside, because Scorpio, even when not acting externally, is always in internal activity. It's like a pressure cooker. On the outside, nothing changes. Inside, everything is shaking. During this period, deep questions, subtle emotional discomforts, and even a feeling that nothing is really falling into place may arise. The sign enters an involuntary listening mode, and this, although it may seem unproductive at first glance, has a profound spiritual value. According to some traditions' mystics, this is the kind of silence that prepares the ground for a more real, more conscious, more legitimate surrender. But it is important to understand that this delivery does not happen automatically. She needs an energetic shift, something that comes with time and changing astrological influences. And that's exactly what starts to happen in the second half of January when the Sun enters Aquarius. What was once a practical requirement and emotional control becomes a challenge to mental freedom, reinvention, and detachment. And here, a new tension arises for Scorpio. If at the beginning of the month the challenge was not to suffocate feeling, now the challenge is not to rationalize what should just be lived. With the Sun in Aquarius, the vibrational field becomes more mental, more abstract, more focused on ideas and future visions. Aquarius wants lightness, transcendence, and lack of commitment to what once was. And Scorpio wants diving, wants intensity, wants to feel what is being experienced to the bone. This difference in rhythm can generate, once again, a subtle discomfort. Scorpio may find themselves trying to explain to themselves feelings that cannot be put into words, trying to logically map emotions that were meant to be crossed, not understood. It's like trying to contain a wave with formulas. This attempt at emotional rationalization, although it may seem useful at first, often leaves traces. The body feels. Relationships feel. Everyday life begins to show signs that something is being controlled too much. A feeling of being distant from yourself may arise, even though you are present in all tasks. And for such a visceral sign, this disconnect can become unbearable over time. It's as if the soul is screaming, but through subtle gestures. Insomnia, restlessness, irritability without an apparent cause, or even a sudden drop in energy. All of this, according to deeper interpretations of spiritual astrology, can be understood as signs that surrender is being avoided. But what does surrender mean to Scorpio? It is not submission, nor passivity. Surrendering, for this archetype, is allowing the feeling to exist in its entirety, without trying to shape or censor it. It's trusting that, even without knowing the end of the story, it's worth going through the present with emotional truth. Delivery begins when control is exhausted. And the month of January, with its challenging transits and changes in energetic direction, seems designed to test this specific point. It is common for many Scorpios to notice, in the last weeks of the month, an internal call to position themselves differently in the face of their own emotions. What was avoided in the early days begins to become unsustainable, and not because external life has changed, but because something inside can no longer support the prison that was built with so much effort. The mask of rationality begins to crack, the body begins to demand space for what was silent, and the soul, as always, begins to push the truth out. This is the delivery that comes without warning, delivery that doesn't ask for permission, it just happens. When this happens, Scorpio enters another state, more authentic, more raw, more connected with what really matters. There is no more room for emotional pretense, and that truth can hurt, yes, but it can also liberate. Free yourself from other people's expectations. Free yourself from rigid internal standards. Free yourself from the obligation to control the uncontrollable. Symbolic astrology recognizes this process as a type of rebirth, not one that happens at the end of a cycle, but one that begins exactly at the moment when everything seems to be falling apart. Because for Scorpio, it is often in the collapse that the essence reveals itself. And that's why understanding these monthly movements is not just an exercise in self-knowledge. It is a spiritual reading instrument, not in the sense of predicting what will happen, but of understanding how the available energies are shaping the emotional and internal field of those who feel everything deeply. The sky, with its transits, does not dictate rules. He points out symbolic paths. It is up to each person to read these signs with honesty and presence. And in the case of Scorpio, this reading is only complete when there is space to feel, even when that feeling doesn't make any sense. If at any point this month you realize that you were more restrained than you would like, if you felt that you had to justify too much how you felt, or that your actions were disconnected from your inner truth, share in the comments what this process was like. What kind of blockage appeared for you? Not everything that reveals itself in everyday life has form. Not everything you feel needs an immediate explanation, and that is precisely where Scorpio operates. While many signs are guided by clear evidence, by visible actions, or by direct speech, Scorpio seems to respond to something that happens before the form, before the event, before the external revelation. There are those who say that this and the sign has a kind of psychic radar, an ancestral sensitivity that captures what is still unfolding on the subtle plane, even if there is no concrete data to prove it. This is not a generic mystical statement. It is a characteristic recognized within the esoteric traditions of symbolic astrology, which point to Scorpio as one of the signs most connected with the hidden layers of time, what manifests itself in energetic space before taking shape in dense reality. This anticipated perception does not happen as a clear vision or as an absolute certainty. It comes as discomfort, like nameless restlessness, like the impression that something is out of place, even when everything seems normal to others. It can be an intuition regarding a person, an environment, a decision, or even a cycle that has not yet begun but has already been sensed. This sensitive characteristic, which has often been treated with suspicion throughout life, can in fact be one of the greatest instruments of guidance that Scorpio carries. It's not about predicting the future. It's about feeling the invisible threads that start to move before the eyes can see them. And when this internal movement begins, it's as if the whole body responds, even without understanding why. During the month, there are specific days when this ability seems to intensify. It's no coincidence. These are days when astrological transits create a greater gap between the visible and the non-visible. And while many pass by these dates without noticing, Scorpio does. It can be in the form of a symbolic dream, of causeless shivers, of insistent thoughts that arise with unusual force. Sometimes it's just the silence that weighs more than usual. And in these moments, the challenge is not just in feeling, but in sustaining that feeling without proof, without external validation, without anyone to confirm what has already been understood inside. This is one of the most demanding aspects of Scorpio's nature. The soul understands, but there is no way to explain it. The mind understands but cannot translate, and the world continues to ask for logic, evidence, justification. Scorpio, then, finds himself in a place between worlds. He knows, but he can't say. He feels it, but he can't show it. And this, according to spiritual schools that study the zodiacal archetypes in depth, generates the so-called weight of the unsaid, a type of emotional charge that arises from voiceless lucidity, knowing too much without being able to express it, understanding deeply without finding space to communicate. This psycho-spiritual condition requires rare emotional maturity, because the initial impulse may be to doubt yourself, to silence instinct, to pretend that you didn't see what you saw, that you didn't feel what you felt. After all, if no one around confirms this perception, is it real? But Scorpio doesn't need confirmation from others to validate what they feel, and that emotional autonomy, while powerful, can be lonely. Therefore, throughout the month, it is common for Scorpios to oscillate between moments of extreme sensitivity and phases of absolute closure, not out of coldness, but for self-protection. Because carrying what is unsaid is often also carrying what others are not ready to hear. And this silent responsibility becomes even more complex when what is sensed not only concerns the internal world itself, but also external dynamics. Scorpio captures other people's emotional nuances with precision. You feel when there is veiled tension, when there is a lie in the air, when there is something hidden behind the words. And because he rarely talks about it openly, he ends up being seen as distant, suspicious, or even cold. But behind the restrained look, there is a constantly active sensitive field, deciphering emotional and energetic codes that most people ignore. Within this scenario, the days of the month that activate these perceptions more strongly are usually linked to challenging aspects between transpersonal planets and the moon. This is because the moon, being the ruler of the emotional and unconscious field, when touched by celestial tensions, opens internal portals to contents that normally remain dormant. And Scorpio, as it has a natural connection with emotional mysteries and the depths of the psyche, ends up functioning as a reception channel for these layers, not always consciously. Sometimes the discomfort appears as insomnia, as sudden anguish, as shortness of breath with no physical explanation. In others, as a desire to withdraw, to avoid contact, to simply silence, not because of escape, but because the internal volume is too loud. In these moments, a powerful practice is to stop and listen. Listen without judging, without trying to understand it logically. Just allow the message to come, even if without immediate translation. Because many of the answers Scorpio seeks won't come in words. They will come in sensations, in synchronicities, in small events that are repeated with subtle signs. Spirituality is not Nephesta screaming, she whispers. And Scorpio, more than any other sign, was born with ears prepared for these whispers. There is profound wisdom in trusting these signs, even when the world asks for proof. The Scorpio experience month after month shows that the invisible also communicates, and that what has not yet been revealed can now be felt, if there is internal space for it. And this space is built in solitude, in internal listening, in non-judgment of what emerges. When this is understood, the feeling of isolation begins to dissolve, because we realize that what seems lonely is, in fact, a much broader form of communication, with an invisible network of meanings that only those who live intensely can access. And it is precisely this level of perception that often leads Scorpio to anticipate changes. He can't explain how he knew, but he did. And this silent anticipation can be the key to more conscious decisions, to necessary cuts, to subtle realignments that avoid greater ruptures. It's not about living on the defensive. It's about walking with presence. Presence in one's own emotional field. Presence in the signals that the body sends. Presence in the unspoken details of each conversation, each look, each choice. And when this listening is practiced regularly, Scorpio realizes that the month stops being just a sequence of days and becomes a symbolic plot, with clues, with codes, with veiled guidelines that can guide with much more precision than any rational plan. Because the days that carry camouflaged messages are not ordinary days. They are intersections between worlds. And the Scorpio who allows himself to be attentive to them begins to access an emotional intelligence that is not written anywhere, but that can be felt clearly when the noise of the external world stops. If throughout this month you felt that something was in the air before it even happened, if you had that feeling of knowing without knowing why, or if you noticed internal movements that you couldn't explain to anyone, share your experience in the comments. There is a silent layer in the time that Scorpio lives. A layer that escapes the calendar, that does not fit into conventional agendas, but that pulses with intensity within the emotional experience of the sign. It's not the new that arrives, it's the old that returns, dressed as new. The cycle of the month does not present itself to Scorpio as a succession of surprises, but as a sequence of reenactments. It's as if life subtly rearranged the elements, changed the characters, changed the setting, but kept the core of the lesson exactly the same. And this is neither coincidence nor punishment. It is a spiritual standard. It's archetypal code. It is part of the path that this sign, according to spiritual astrological traditions, came to fulfill in terms of deep self-knowledge and internal liberation. These reinterpretations are not just symbolic. They are emotional. A conversation that touches on a sensitive and already known point. A situation that revives the feeling of abandonment, control, impotence, or renunciation. A bond that seems new, but triggers the same place of need or defense from times past. And the most interesting thing is to realize that none of this needs to be identical to be the same. What returns is not the form, it is the sensation. It is the unresolved emotional charge that finds a new opportunity to be seen with more presence, more maturity, more awareness. According to more subtle lines of esoteric astrology, Scorpio is not just the sign of symbolic death, as is often said superficially. He is, more precisely, the guardian of the repetition that transforms. He observes what insists on returning and understands that this does not happen because the universe is cruel or because destiny is closed. Repetition is a spiritual opportunity, and this is one of the most challenging truths to accept because it requires emotional responsibility. It demands that you look at your own history and recognize yourself not as a victim of the cycles, but as a co-author of them. The difference between stagnation and evolution in this context lies in the internal posture. Reacting with resistance means repeating the pain without learning. Reacting with presence and surrender means letting the pain reveal what has not yet been accepted. And this is not about being passive. It's about stopping fighting against what time has already brought. It's about realizing that the emotional content that returns only dissolves when it is felt to the end, without shortcuts, without masks, without justifications. Scorpio has, within itself, this archetypal force of regeneration, but regeneration only happens when there is a true collapse of the old emotional structure. This means allowing certain inner parts to die, not in a negative sense, but in the sense that something needs to be released, left behind, closed with dignity. And it is at this point that the cycle of the month takes on a sacred meaning. Each repetition is a veiled invitation to stop being who you were, to make room for a new center of emotional identity. However, this transformation does not happen in the blink of an insight. It is slow, cumulative, and requires practice in inner listening. Older spirituality often says that deep learning happens in a spiral, not a straight line. This means that we may have the impression of returning to the same place, but we are returning with a different look, with another body, with other possible choices. Scorpio understands this intuitively. He feels that life has layers, and you know that to cross each of them, you need to strip away old versions of yourself. But that, in itself, is already a challenge, because the self-protection instinct is strong. Resistance appears in the form of control, rigidity, denial. There's a part of Scorpio that doesn't want to let go of what it already knows, even when that something no longer makes sense. It's as if the known were safer than the emptiness that appears when something falls apart. But the truth is that emptiness never comes empty. It carries a fertile field of possibilities not yet realized, and to access them you need to go through deconstruction with emotional confidence, a confidence that does not come from logic, but from delivery, and that's when the emotional mirror becomes visible. Each phase of the month, each situation that returns with a new guise, each conversation that seems to touch the same wound from another time, all of this is a mirror, not an ordinary mirror, but one that reflects what is invisible, one that shows not only what you are, but what you still believe yourself to be. And whoever can look at this reflection without escaping, without distorting, without trying to break the image, begins to enter another stage of their own path, a stage where the past stops being a prison and becomes a portal. This process, however, does not happen linearly. There are months when the transformation seems more fluid. In others, everything freezes, and there is no way to predict when it will be which. What exists, in fact, is the constant opportunity to ask yourself, how am I reacting to what is coming back? Because life always comes back, and he returns in the most ingenious way possible, with disguises, with metaphors, with new combinations of people, places, and situations. But at the heart of the experience, the lesson is the same. And if you've ever felt like you're reliving something under different names but with the same pain, then you're exactly where you need to be to choose differently. Repetition, in the symbolic universe, is not punishment. She is reinforcement. It shows where there has not yet been integration, where you still react on autopilot, where something is still expected from others that can only be found within. Scorpio, upon realizing this, gains access to a rare type of maturity, the maturity of those who know that true evolution is not in controlling what happens, but in transforming how one feels about what happens. This is emotional alchemy. This is the hidden power of the sign. And this is the invisible work that happens every month behind the scenes of time, between the lines of experiences. The cycle of the month is not about great external twists and turns. It's about small internal fixes. It's about adjusting your gaze, releasing expectations, reacting more kindly, choosing more clearly. It is these subtle details that, when accumulated, build a new pattern of emotional response. And this new standard, although discreet, changes everything. It changes how you position yourself, how you protect yourself, how you surrender. And little by little, without rushing, a new version of yourself begins to emerge. Not because the world has changed, but because you started to move with another frequency, with another center, with another vibration. If you've ever had the feeling that life was putting you once again in the same situation, but you realized that you reacted differently, calmer, firmer, more aware, then share your experience. If you've gotten this far, it's because something inside you recognized the depth of this content, and that already says a lot about your inner journey. So before you leave, take this moment to strengthen this connection even further. Subscribe to the channel now, because every week there are more reflections like this, always respecting your time, your truth, and your search. Also, leave a like, not only as a way of supporting this work, but as a sign that this type of conversation needs to continue to exist. And if you want to take the next step on this journey, the video that is now appearing on the left side of your screen was made exactly for you. It complements everything we have experienced here and can open even more doors within your process. See you there.